I bought my house 3 years ago. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was mine. Every corner carried a piece of my struggle. The double shifts, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices I made to get out of debt and finally own something that felt safe. At 31, I was proud of myself. As a nurse working long hours in Ohio, that little house meant stability, peace, and freedom from the chaos I grew up in. My parents, Susan and Robert Harris, had always been close to my younger sister, Lily. She was the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who helped pay bills, took care of everyone, and still somehow ended up blamed for everything that went wrong. When my dad had surgery last year, I didn't hesitate to move them into my house to help him recover. I cooked, drove him to appointments, and tried to make them comfortable. I thought maybe this time they'd finally see me for who I was, a daughter who truly cared. For a while, it seemed peaceful. We shared dinners, laughed over old memories, and talked about Lily's upcoming wedding. She was engaged to Matt, a guy who seemed nice enough, though I always sensed he looked down on me a bit. I brushed it off. It wasn't worth the energy. Then one evening, during dinner, everything shifted. Lily started talking about her wedding plans, and my mom was glowing with excitement. "It's going to be beautiful," she said, looking between me and my dad. I smiled, genuinely happy for her. But then my dad cleared his throat and said something that froze me completely. He looked straight at me and said, "Megan, we've decided to give Lily this house as her wedding gift." I laughed because it sounded insane. My house? The one I bought with my money? I thought he was joking. But then my mom slid a document across the table, a property deed. My name was still on it, but a section had been marked for transfer. "You've done so well for yourself," she said softly, "and Lily needs a good start. You'll understand." It was like my chest caved in. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. They weren't joking. They were serious. My parents, the same people I had taken care of, were planning to give away my home to my sister like it was a piece of furniture they owned. Lily sat there with that same calm smile she always wore when she got her way. "It's just practical," she said. "You're single. I'm starting a family. It makes sense." In that moment, I didn't say much. I couldn't. My throat felt tight. I just nodded and excused myself from the table, walking to my room and closing the door before they could see the tears welling in my eyes. That night, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it means learning who would betray you the moment they think you won't fight back. The next evening, the air in the house felt strange. My mom had cooked a big dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Lily's favorite meal. Everyone was unusually cheerful. Lily and Matt were talking about their wedding plans, and my parents kept smiling like they were hiding something. I sat there trying to join in, but a knot sat in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. Halfway through dinner, my mom clinked her glass and said, "We have some wonderful news." She reached over and held Lily's hand. "Your father and I have decided to give you and Matt a special gift for your marriage." Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement, but I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was money, or maybe a piece of jewelry. Then my mom said it, calmly, like she was talking about the weather. "We're giving you this house." For a moment, everything went silent. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to laugh. I even smiled because it had to be a joke. But no one laughed. My dad reached into a folder and slid a few papers across the table toward me. "It's already in motion," he said. "We're transferring the deed." I froze. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate. "You're what?" I asked quietly. My mom smiled as if she was saying something normal. "Sweetheart, you've done so well for yourself," she began. "You're stable, independent. You can always get another place. But Lily's starting her new life. She deserves a good home." My heart started racing. "Mom, this is my house," I said, my voice shaking. "I bought it. I paid for every inch of it." My dad sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Megan, you've always been the strong one. Lily needs this more than you do. You'll be fine." Lily sat back, twirling her engagement ring, not saying a word at first. Then she added softly, "It's not like you'll be on the street, Meg. You'll figure something out. You always do." That sentence hit harder than anything else. It sounded almost rehearsed, like she knew this was coming. I looked at the document on the table, my name, my address, my house, and beside it, the space where my signature was supposed to go. I couldn't believe it. My own parents had planned this behind my back. They were taking my home and giving it away to someone else, and they expected me to accept it with a smile. When I didn't respond, my mom's tone changed. "Don't make this difficult," she said quietly. "Family supports family." My dad nodded, adding, "You owe this to your sister after everything she's been through." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask what I ever did wrong to be treated like this. But instead, I sat there, staring at the table, my hands trembling. They finished dinner as if nothing had happened. I didn't eat another bite. I just sat there in silence, watching the people who were supposed to love me treat my hard work like it was theirs to give away. After dinner, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I went to the living room where my parents were sitting and asked them if they were really serious about giving my house to Lily. My mom looked annoyed, as if my question itself was disrespectful. "Megan, why are you making this so difficult?" she said. "We're doing this for Lily. She's starting her life. You should be happy for her." I tried to stay calm, but my voice broke when I said, "Happy? You're taking my home. How can I be happy about that?" My mom crossed her arms. "You're being selfish," she said coldly. "You've always had everything. You have a good job, you're independent. Lily doesn't have what you do. All we're asking is for you to help your sister." Help. They were stealing from me and calling it help. I looked at my dad, hoping he would at least understand, but he didn't even meet my eyes. "Your mother's right," he said flatly. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We're trying to keep peace in the family. Think about how it will look if you refuse to help your own sister on her wedding day." I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't about peace or family image. It was about control. My mom had always known how to twist things to make me feel guilty. When I reminded them how I helped pay for Dad's surgery, how I supported them for months when they couldn't work, she brushed it off. "That's what children do, Megan. You shouldn't keep score." Lily came into the room just then, pretending to look concerned. "Hey, don't fight over me," she said softly. "If it's that big of a deal, maybe we can figure something out." But the way she said it didn't sound sincere. She glanced at me with a small smirk, like she knew she had already won. "It's not like you'll be homeless," she added, echoing the same cruel words from earlier. "You're strong. You'll find another place." Her tone made me feel smaller than I had in years. I turned to my father again, desperate for some fairness, but he just said, "This is for the good of the family. You're overreacting." That sentence shattered something inside me. I thought of all the times I had put their needs before mine, working extra hours to help with bills, paying Lily's college application fees when my parents couldn't, skipping vacations to stay home when Dad was recovering. And still, somehow, I was the problem. They weren't just taking my home. They were trying to make me believe I was wrong for caring about it. My mom's voice softened, but it only made it worse. "You're being unloving," she said. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I didn't answer. I just stood there, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath me. It was clear that no matter what I said, they had already made up their minds. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing the family I thought I knew. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I opened it, my hands went cold. It was an eviction notice, official and typed, with my father's signature at the bottom. It said I had 30 days to vacate the property. My own father had signed a paper to remove me from the home I bought. I just stood there for a long time, staring at it, unable to move. They hadn't just talked about giving the house to Lily, they had already done it. The title had been transferred. I wasn't even the owner anymore. My name had been quietly erased. I felt sick. I called my mom, my voice shaking, and asked her how they could do this without telling me. She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Megan, please," she said. "We didn't want to upset you. We thought this would be easier if it was already handled." Handled. That word burned. I was nothing more than a problem they needed to handle. From that day on, the house no longer felt like home. I couldn't sit in the living room without feeling angry. The walls that once gave me comfort now felt like they were closing in. Every photo, every piece of furniture, felt tainted by their betrayal. Lily and Matt started coming over more often, walking around like they already owned the place. One afternoon, I came home from work to find them in the kitchen with paint samples spread out across the counter. Matt looked up casually and said, "We're thinking of opening this space up. Maybe knock down that wall." I couldn't even respond. It was still my home at that moment, and yet they were planning renovations like I was a guest. Lily smiled, pretending to be polite. "Oh, don't worry, we'll wait until you're moved out. We want you to have time." It wasn't kindness, it was mockery dressed as manners. I started packing that same night. Every box I sealed felt like a wound. I didn't cry anymore. I was past that. The hurt had turned into something sharper, quiet anger, cold and steady. I worked late, packed at night, and avoided them as much as I could. My parents acted like nothing was wrong, still eating dinner together as if they hadn't destroyed my trust. The last night before I left, I walked through the empty rooms. The house looked smaller without my things in it. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter where I used to drink coffee before work and whispered to myself, "They'll regret this." Not in anger, but in certainty. When I locked the door for the last time, I didn't look back. I loaded the last box into my car and drove away in silence. On the outside, I looked calm, but inside, something had changed forever. I didn't know how or when, but I promised myself one thing: they would never have power over me again. The apartment I moved into was small and quiet. It had thin walls and old floors that creaked when I walked, but at least it was mine. For the first few weeks, I barely slept. I'd wake up thinking about the house, about my parents sitting in the living room I'd decorated, and Lily laughing in my kitchen. The thought made my stomach twist, but I kept reminding myself that I was free now. Free from their control, free from their guilt. I threw myself into work. I picked up every extra shift I could get at the hospital. Sometimes I worked 16 hours straight, coming home so tired I'd fall asleep in my scrubs. I didn't have much energy for anything else, but working helped. It kept me from thinking too much, and it gave me purpose again. Slowly, my savings began to grow. One night, while sorting through old boxes, I came across a letter from my grandmother's lawyer. She had passed away years before, and I remembered my mom mentioning a small inheritance that had been set aside for me. Back then, I never looked into it because my parents handled everything. But now I decided to. After a few calls, I found out the truth. My grandmother had left me a sizable sum. Not huge, but enough to change things if I used it wisely. My parents had never told me the full amount. I could only guess why. Maybe they didn't think I needed it. Maybe they wanted to keep it quiet. Either way, it was mine now, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. Instead of buying a new house right away, I invested. I started small, buying a rundown duplex on the edge of town. I spent weekends fixing it up, learning from YouTube videos and online forums. I rented it out a few months later and started seeing steady income. That gave me confidence. I took real estate courses after work and studied late into the night. Within a year, I owned 3 small rental properties. No one knew. Not my coworkers, not my parents, not even Lily. I kept it all to myself. When people asked how I was doing, I just smiled and said, "I'm fine." Inside, I was planning, patiently, quietly. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building something they could never take away from me again. At the hospital, I got promoted to head nurse after months of hard work. It came with a raise, and I used that to invest in another property. Each decision was careful, calculated. I learned to move in silence, to let success grow quietly where no one could reach it. Sometimes I thought about the house I lost, but I didn't feel the same pain anymore. I was becoming stronger, sharper. The girl who once begged for approval was gone. I was planning something bigger than revenge. I was building a life that would make their betrayal meaningless. And deep down, I knew the day would come when they'd see exactly who they'd thrown away. Almost 2 years passed before I heard anything about Lily or my parents. I kept my distance and focused on my work and investments. My life had become steady and peaceful, and I didn't need them anymore. Then one afternoon, while leaving the hospital, I ran into Mrs. Thompson, an old neighbor from my former street. She smiled politely but hesitated before speaking. "I didn't know you moved back," she said. I told her I hadn't. Then she lowered her voice. "Oh, I just assumed since your old house is going up for auction." Her words froze me. I asked her what she meant, pretending not to care too much, but my heart was racing. She explained that the couple living there, Lily and Matt, had fallen behind on their mortgage payments. There was talk that the bank would be taking the house soon. I thanked her, forced a smile, and walked away. My hands were shaking as I got into my car. I hadn't thought about that house in months. Hearing it was in trouble stirred something deep inside me. After everything they'd done, now it was falling apart, just like the people who took it. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past my old neighborhood. The house looked neglected. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling from the porch rails. The windows were covered with cheap blinds, and the flower bed I once cared for was now filled with weeds. It didn't look like the warm home I'd built. It looked tired, broken, almost abandoned. I parked a block away and sat there, watching for a moment. Then Matt came out, slamming the front door behind him. He looked thinner, angrier, his shirt wrinkled and his face lined with frustration. Lily followed him to the driveway, yelling something I couldn't make out. They were arguing loudly, hands flying in the air. He got into his truck and drove off, leaving her standing there with tears on her face. Later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Matt's construction company had gone under after a series of bad deals. He borrowed money he couldn't repay, and the debts piled up. They'd tried to refinance the house to save it, but the payments were too high. The same home they took from me, the one they said would give them a fresh start, was dragging them down. I didn't feel joy exactly. It wasn't happiness, but a deep, quiet sense of justice. Life had come full circle in a way I never could have planned. They had taken something that wasn't theirs, and now it was slipping away. I didn't reach out or say anything. I stayed quiet, just like I had for the last 2 years. I watched from a distance as the perfect couple everyone once admired fell apart piece by piece. The house that once represented my biggest heartbreak was now a symbol of their downfall. And even though they didn't know it yet, I was already planning to be there when the final chapter closed. The morning of the auction, I woke up earlier than usual. I dressed simply, dark jeans, a blazer, and my hair tied back. I didn't want attention. I just wanted closure. It had been almost 3 years since I'd walked away from that house, and now I was going back for it on my own terms. I parked a few blocks away and walked to the courthouse where the property auction was being held. The place was crowded with real estate agents, investors, and curious locals. I kept my head down, holding the bidding paddle quietly in my hand. When they started listing properties, my heart pounded as soon as I heard the address, my old address. The auctioneer read it out loud, followed by the opening bid. It was shockingly low, almost unfair considering how much that house had once meant to me. Still, it felt right. It was time. "Do I have any bidders?" the auctioneer asked. A few hands went up. I waited, calm and steady. The price climbed slowly, but I could tell the interest wasn't strong. No one wanted a property tangled in debt and repairs. Finally, when the bidding slowed, I lifted my paddle. My number was called out, and the auctioneer nodded. Someone else tried to outbid me, but I stayed composed, increasing my offer just enough each time. Within minutes, the hammer came down. Sold, to bidder number 47. That was me. I had just bought my own house back, at less than half the price it was worth. A wave of emotion hit me all at once. Relief, satisfaction, disbelief. It all mixed together, but I kept my expression steady. As people began leaving, I turned and saw Lily standing near the back of the room. She must have come hoping for a miracle, maybe thinking someone would step in and save her. When her eyes met mine, she froze. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I walked toward her, calm but firm, holding the auction papers in my hand. She didn't speak at first. Her face turned pale, and then red. "You," she finally said, her voice trembling. I gave her a small smile. "Guess I found a new place after all," I said softly. For a moment, she just stared at me, speechless. I didn't stay to hear her excuses or anger. I walked right past her, my heels clicking against the floor, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Outside, I took a deep breath. The sun was shining, and for the first time since losing that house, I felt peace. Not because I had taken something from them, but because I had reclaimed what was mine. No tricks, no guilt, just justice served quietly. As I got into my car, I looked at the courthouse one last time. What they once used to break me had just become my victory. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. 2 days after the auction, I was at the house cleaning up when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the window and froze. It was my parents. My father got out first, looking angry and stiff. My mother followed, her eyes red and puffy like she had been crying. For a moment, I considered not opening the door, but part of me wanted this conversation. It was long overdue. When I opened the door, my mother rushed forward. "Megan, please," she said, her voice shaking. "You have to understand. Lily is devastated. You can't do this to her." I didn't move. "Do what, Mom?" I asked quietly. "Buy back the house you stole from me?" Her lip trembled. "You don't have to be cruel. She's your sister. You know how hard things have been for her. Just sell it back. We'll figure something out." Behind her, my father finally spoke. "This isn't right, Megan," he said sharply. "You humiliated your family in public. You should have talked to us first before doing something like that." I stared at him in disbelief. "Talk to you? Like how you talked to me before signing an eviction notice with your own name on it." His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. My mom reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "You don't understand what this did to us," she said. That was it. The moment I stopped holding it all in. I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Mom. You don't understand what it did to me. You took everything I worked for and gave it away like it was nothing. You made me feel guilty for wanting what was mine. You called me selfish, unloving, ungrateful. And now that you've lost it all, suddenly I'm supposed to save you." Tears spilled down her face. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We just wanted to help Lily." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't want to help her. You wanted to control me. You couldn't stand that I finally had something of my own. You didn't destroy me, Mom. You just taught me to stop depending on people who never saw my worth." My father's face turned red. "Watch your tone, young lady," he snapped. "We're still your parents." I met his gaze without flinching. Parents don't betray their children and then demand respect. You taught me what family shouldn't feel like. Now you can live with what you created. The silence that followed was heavy. My mom covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. My dad finally looked away, his pride crumbling. I opened the door wider and gestured toward the driveway. "You should go," I said. "I have work to do." They hesitated, then slowly walked back to the car. I stood at the doorway, watching them leave. For years, I had wanted their approval, their love, their understanding. But as I closed the door, I realized I didn't need any of it anymore. I finally had peace, and they had nothing left to take. After her parents left that day, Megan stood in the middle of the empty living room for a long time. The house still carried traces of the past, the cracks in the walls, the faded paint, the memories that used to make her ache. But this time, she didn't feel pain. She felt strength. Everything that had happened led her to this moment. The house was hers again, not because of luck, but because she fought for it. She started the renovation the next week. Every corner that once held sadness now turned into something beautiful. She painted the walls a warm cream color, replaced the old floors with dark wood, and filled the rooms with soft light. The kitchen, which Lily and Matt had started tearing apart before she moved out, became her favorite space. She rebuilt it completely, sleek counters, bright cabinets, and wide windows that let the morning sun in. It was no longer the house they took from her. It was the home she reclaimed for herself. Sometimes neighbors stopped by just to peek and compliment the changes. Some whispered about how the same house Lily and Matt had bragged about owning was now Megan's again. They called it karma, justice, or destiny. Megan didn't correct them. She just smiled. She had no desire for revenge anymore. She'd already won by simply standing on her own. In the evenings, she would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. The air felt lighter now. No one was yelling. No one was demanding anything from her. There was peace, real peace, for the first time in years. Her parents and Lily stopped reaching out after the confrontation. At first, the silence was strange, almost too quiet. But Megan soon realized she liked it that way. She no longer had to justify herself, no longer had to feel guilty for choosing herself over people who hurt her. She began focusing more on her work and the properties she owned quietly. Her investments were growing steadily, and she finally had the freedom to plan her future exactly how she wanted. She even started mentoring younger nurses at the hospital, something she had always wanted to do. One afternoon, while standing in her backyard, she looked at the freshly painted house and smiled. Everything she had lost was standing right in front of her. But this time, it was built on her own terms. People often said that what goes around comes around. For Megan, it was true. The house that once symbolized betrayal had become her place of peace. The same walls that once held tears now held laughter. She didn't need an apology anymore. The silence from her family was enough. She had learned that peace isn't found in forgiveness from others. It's found in taking your power back and living your life freely. And that was exactly what she was doing. The house that once broke her was now her greatest reminder that she could survive anything and rebuild better than before. Years passed and life moved on. Megan continued to work hard, travel, and enjoy the quiet life she had built. Her home was still her sanctuary, a place filled with calm and warmth. She rarely thought about her parents or Lily anymore. The hurt had faded into something softer, something she could finally live with. One afternoon, she got a call from a distant relative. Her father was in the hospital again. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the phone. The old anger didn't come back this time, only a quiet sadness. She knew she had to go, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to close that chapter properly. When she walked into the hospital room, her father looked smaller, weaker than she remembered. His eyes softened when he saw her. "Megan," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You came." She nodded. There were no tears, no yelling, no heavy words. Just silence between them, thick with all the things that had been left unsaid for years. He tried to apologize, stumbling over his words, but she gently stopped him. "Dad," she said softly, "I already forgave you." He looked at her, confused. "Why? After everything we did?" "Because forgiveness isn't for you," she replied calmly. "It's for me. I didn't want to carry that pain forever." He closed his eyes, tears forming. She placed her hand over his for a moment. There was no hatred left in her heart, just acceptance. What was done could never be undone, but she had already healed. Before leaving, she stood by the door and said one last thing. "You can't steal peace from someone who's already reclaimed it." Her voice was steady, full of quiet strength. She walked out of that hospital lighter than she had felt in years. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no regrets. Just a peaceful end to something that had once nearly destroyed her. When she got home, she stood outside her house, the sun setting behind it. The golden light hit the walls, making them glow softly. She took a deep breath and smiled. This was where her story began, and where it came full circle. The woman who once cried herself to sleep in a small apartment was now unshakable. Every scar had turned into strength, every betrayal into wisdom. Her home was proof of that. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat on the porch, the same spot she had sat so many times before. This time it felt different. She wasn't thinking about what she lost anymore, only about what she had gained. Peace, freedom, self-respect. Megan had learned that the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was rising above the pain, rebuilding quietly, and living well. As the evening breeze moved through the trees, she whispered to herself, "I made it." And she truly had. The girl they cast aside had become a woman who no one could break again.